What's going on, everybody? It's Kaijus coming at you with a brand new video, and the current Yu-Gi-Oh! Format we're in is pretty interesting. With the release of Cyberstorm Access, and with basically no ban list in sight as of recording this video, which I can't wait to eat my words after this finally goes up on Sunday, we've got an incredibly diverse format with a lot of different powerful decks to look out for, which means that the different hand traps and board breakers that you need to play are pretty diverse as well. As I mentioned in my hand trap tier list, which you should totally check out if you haven't already, link up in the annotation in the top right, we're in a significantly more hand trap focused format right now than the tier limit format or Kshatri-La format, in which board breakers were like the really big thing that you had to prepare yourself with, because a lot of the top decks are prepared for a lot of the strongest board breakers. Struggling to find out which ones? Well, that's why I'm here to give to y'all my board breaker tier list for the May 2023 format post Cyberstorm Access. Starting us off, we have Dark Hole, and Dark Hole, see, it's a blowout, but like, not really. I'm gonna put it at the top of minimal because Dark Hole has its applications, but a lot of the top decks right now don't care about it or have applications around it. Kshatri-La can protect their Shangri-La with its own effect if they end on the Zone Lock board. Purely does not care about it at all because they're ending on a towers, and Super Heavy can not only Omni-Negate it with one of like their 3 Omni-Negates minimum they put on board, but also they can play Spell Canceller, so a lot of spell-based removal isn't the best right now. And then not to mention, I think this is a really good format for trap decks, and Dark Hole's just not gonna really do much to trap decks. However, it does out cards like Ibli, which as we know isn't going to get hit anytime soon as of the new reprint coming out in the shiny 25th anniversary rare. So I'm gonna put it at the top of minimal. Remember that the way this tier list works is that it doesn't mean it actually does minimal damage, it's just not the best of the board breakers, that you could play right now. Dark Ruler is an interesting card because Dark Ruler feels like it'd be really good right now. You know, you got most Kshatri-La boards are actually ending on a Rise Heart Pass. The zone locking is kinda there, kinda not. It depends on the matchup. And then, you know, Super Heavy makes up a bunch of Omni Negates and stuff, and so you think Dark Ruler would be really good against that. But again, Spell Canceller is a card if they end up going for it. I'm not going to use Spell Canceller against like all of these, by the way, because if they don't go for the Spell Canceller or don't have it, then I mean Dark Ruler is just absolutely free. But then you also have decks like Purely that don't really care. Sprite still has extra things in their back row they can use. It works against a deck like Sword Soul pretty well at least though. So I'm going to put it in the blowout category because it is a pretty nice card to have in your side deck. But I don't think we're in a format where main deck Dark Ruler is worthy just yet. But it's absolutely not the worst thing you could play. Next up we have Droplet, and Droplet just keeps getting worse and worse, y'all. So I like Droplet, don't get me wrong. I think it's a really cool card, and you know, it was one of the most expensive staples in the game for a while there. But you want to play Droplet in Shifter format and against Kshatri-La? Like, even still, you're not hitting anything on the Purely end board, and ignoring Spell Canceller, I mean, you can only hit so many things on the Super Heavy board without losing a bunch of stuff in your hand. Droplet's not necessarily a bad card, just still a pretty bad card to play right now. So next up on our list is Evenly Matched, and Evenly's a bit interesting because this was like the most dominant blowout board breaker for the longest time, but when you think about the top decks right now, a lot of them don't care much about Evenly or play around it. Because Purely's ending on the 1 monster most of the time. I mean, like, they're just gonna keep the big towers. Kshatri-La ending on a Rise Heart Pass won't really care about it, not to mention they can still block off your back row zones if they are scared of something like Evenly for their end board. Sprite's gonna Ibli lock you most of the time, most likely, and so you're probably not going to be able to activate the Evenly in the first place. And then, of course, Super Heavy having all these Omni Negates. I think Evenly is definitely still a blowout against, like, most matchups, especially if they don't have a prepared negate for it or something, And it's still a really good trade against a deck like Purely in case they do end on like the towers and like a bunch of the back row. You're still getting rid of all the back row, that's really good, right? But there's definitely better board breaking options right now that you could play, which is really shocking to say. Next up we have Harpy's Feather Duster, and I'm gonna actually put Harpy's at the bottom of blowout. And it is a blowout, of course, against trap decks, but the main reason I'm putting it in blowout is because trap decks, I keep saying this, I think trap decks are really underrated right now. You have a lot of people not playing cards like Evenly, or not really maining cards like Evenly, I should say, and then not really preparing with things like Duster all the time, and just not preparing to go against a trap deck in general, and then they have all these like monster outs, maybe even in the main, and you just set 5 pass and like stare them directly in the eyes, and they're like, huh? I've been doing pretty well with Dinomorphia lately. I know a lot of people on Twitter, a lot of my mutuals have tagged me talking about how they've been doing really good with trap decks lately. Our friend Javon is actually about to build Labyrinth, so that's really exciting. I think that Harpies is a card that you probably should have at least in your side deck, because if you're not prepared for a trap deck right now, it's definitely going to catch you off guard and you're going to take some L's. Next on our list, we have Chalice, and I mean, Chalice, it's a 1-for-1 trade, don't get me wrong, against certain things. Pretty good against a Rise Heart Pass, and it can also at least trade off with something on the Super Heavy board should they not go for Spell Canceller. But I mean, honestly, I think Imperm is just a better card because it also functions as a hand trap, which is super important right now. And so I'm going to put it, actually I'll put it above because it is a 1-for-1 trade. You're either going to negate something or your opponent's going to negate it. So, I mean, you're definitely getting some value out of it. You're just not really getting as much as you could have gotten with some other board breaker. Alright, so here's where things get interesting, because now we're going to be talking about Kaijus. And for those that like to skip to the end and look at the tier list, I'm also mentioning Santa Claus here. Thank you. So keep that in mind as I talk about this. I'm going to put them in the busted category. So it's a bit odd, not gonna lie, because Kaijus have always been either in minimal or at the very bottom of blowout, because it's just a 1-for-1 trade, right? Like, how good can a Kaiju be? Well, a lot of end boards right now, a Rise Heart Pass, the Kshatri-La Pass, and then you have a bunch of things like Sprite ending on only 1 to 2 actual monster disruptions, and then of course you can still get a trade off with Super Heavy. Like, Kaijus are actually pretty decent, and in the case of Santa Claus, not only is it a good small world bridge for a lot of decks, a lot of people don't know that, MathMech in particular, but it's also a level 6 that you contribute over the Ibli with, so that if you get Ibli locked by Sprite or Castra or whatever, you can still end up playing the game without having to waste your battle phase crashing the Ibli and your precious life points. I think Kaijus are pretty cool right now, especially again if your deck can small world bridge into them or have another way of searching them, Dinosaur for example, grabbing Dogoron. I think that they're really cool to mess around with, and definitely something you should consider playing if you're not already. Next up we have Imperm, and I'm also going to put Imperm in the busted category, namely because again it is a hand trap, and hand traps are just so important right now, but much like Chalice, it's also a 1-for-1 trade, but of course it has a lot more flexibility because yeah, while you can't use it while you already have things on board, that's not so much of an issue right now as it has been in prior formats like say Tier Limit format. Next up we have Kaiju Slumber, and this is interesting because I like Kaiju Slumber, but it suffers a lot of the same issues as Dark Hole. It is a 1-for-1 trade when it comes to negates and stuff, but it doesn't really work against things like Purely. It's good against a Rise Heart Pass, yeah, but you could have also just opened a Kaiju. So I'm gonna put it probably above Dark Hole, because it does mean you're playing Kaiju, so it's still really, really good, but it's not really the most amazing card. Next on our list is Kurikara Div Incarnate, and this card's been seeing a lot of play and a lot of success lately. Keep in mind, take this with a grain of salt, by the way, other than the very top and the very bottom. A lot of these aren't going to be in a specific order, so it doesn't mean Kaijus are better than Imperm, which is better than Kurikara, whatever. It doesn't really matter, it's just the tier that matters. But Kurikara has been seeing a lot of play lately, and it's really good against a lot of decks. I mean, you can hit the Arise Heart or anything on the Castra board if they go for the full board. You can hit the Purely Noir once they start returning your things back. You can hit, like, almost anything on the Sprite board that isn't their back row, of course, or your Ibli. And then while you will be eating some negates from the Super Heavy board, you can definitely kill some things like Appaloosa should they go for it, or anything else that could be problematic. So I think that Kurikara is a really strong card, and given the sheer price spike of this card going up from like $15 to like $60 a pop, I think it's pretty obvious that other players think so too. Next on the list is Lava Golem, and Lava Golem is also really, really good. I'm gonna put it actually above Evenly, because it doesn't work against Noir Pass or Rise Heart Pass, things like that, but they're probably gonna try to end another monster if they can, maybe the Plump, that's the one that steals from the graveyard and such, or the Beauty, the one that has the Imperm effect. And then of course the full Castra inboard is something to think about, and then you have things like Sprite, you have things like, Sword Soul, which is a really good one to use this against. And then of course getting rid of 2 Omnis on a Super Heavy board or a Spell Canceller is really, really good. It's just the cost of your normal summon that's like the biggest drawback of this card, but it's not the end of the world, y'all. I mean, a lot of decks function without normal summons. Have you read MathMech Circular? I think Lava Golem isn't the busted card that it has been in formats prior. However, it's still a really strong card that you should probably check out if you can afford to use it. Next on our list is Lightning Storm, and I actually want to put Lightning Storm under Dark Ruler and above Harpies. I think Lightning Storm's actually coming a lot further back into the format because Kshatri-La isn't the only real top deck that matters. You have a lot of decks that want to put their things in attack position like powerful Link monsters, and then a lot of things that just aren't really prepared for Lightning Storm, not to mention, it does hit back row like Harpy's Feather Duster, and I did mention trap decks are really strong right now. So Lightning Storm is definitely a card that if you have the room for it and you're just looking for things to throw in there, not a bad side deck card. Next on our list is Raigeki, and I'm going to put Raigeki under Dark Hole because the benefit to Dark Hole right now that would make it even remotely want to be played, is that you can out things like Ibli, but Raigeki doesn't do that, so why would you play Raigeki over Dark Hole most of the time, you know? Next on our list, we have the Egg, and where do I want to put the Egg? Definitely below Lava Golem, because Lava Golem's more likely to come up than Sphere Mode. Honestly, I kind of want to put it... I'm going to put it under Dark Ruler, because while it's easier to use against Super Heavy than Dark Ruler has a little bit more application. Sphere Mode's definitely a card that can still hit a lot of end boards. If Kshatri goes for the full end board, you can hit Super Heavy for sure, and then you can hit some various other things. You know, Sprite can sometimes end on multiple things if they open a good hand, not to mention the Sword Soul triple synchro play, or things with like Monk and everything. Again, it's similar to Lava Golem that you have to waste your normal summon, but it's not as good as Lava Golem in my opinion because it requires a more specific activation cost. It also doesn't do the 1000 burn every standby, which can be really crucial when it comes to going for OTKs, Recital Starling. And then of course you can actually attack the Lava Golem, whereas you can't attack the Sphere Mode, and to my knowledge you also can't target it with effects, so it ends up being a lot more annoying to out. Next on our list is Super Poly, and I'm not too sure about Super Poly. It's still a card I really don't like playing against, especially, but I think Super Poly isn't the best card you could play right now. Like, let me think real quick. So I'm gonna put it here just for now. I'm not putting it in broke. I'm trying to think what's the like most common Sword Soul end board. Ignoring Spell Canceller. We have things like Regulus on board, we have things like potentially Appaloosa, Cleefort Genius might still be sitting on board, IP Masquerena. Yeah, honestly, I'm not quite sure how amazing Super Poly is. I'm gonna put it above Raigeki, under Dark Hole. I think that you can definitely Super Poly some people, especially like a branded player that isn't paying attention. But I mean, why would you Super Poly, like, in the side or anything like that when, like, 1 or 2 decks can actually be affected by it, you know? Like, it's good going first, setting it against Super Heavy so you can stop them from playing midway, but other than that, it's like, eh. Next on our list is Triple T, and let me think here. Triple T, I'm not sure if I want to put it in Busted or Blowout. I think it's a really good card, especially now there's a lot of hand traps in the format. So I want to put it in Busted, not gonna lie, just at the bottom of Busted. I think it's a super powerful card coming into a hand trap format. You got cards like Ash, Ogre, Droll especially running around. And even if you can't draw 2 because you get drolled or something, you can still rip a card directly out of your opponent's hand. And going second, stealing a monster is one of the most powerful things you can do, especially if it's a monster with a disruption like a Baron de Fleur. So I think I want to put it in the busted category. How often do we have like this many things in the busted category? Other than the times when Sphere Mode and Lava Golem both went up there at once, I'm not sure. Next up we have Ultimate Slayer, and as always, this card's going into the broke category. Yeah, you're gonna play Slayer in Kshatri-La Shifter format. Like, the best deck to play this in was like Drytron, and you're gonna play Drytron in Kshatri-La Shifter Droll format. Like, come on, y'all. I mean, this card is still really cool. I do always think it's going to have its time in the meta, but I think right now is still not quite the time for it. Next on our list, we have Underworld Goddess, and I think Underworld Goddess has gotten a lot better. Again, when we think about Kshatri-La, it's more a Rise Heart Pass rather than the full Zone Lock end board. When we think of decks like Purely, they have a Towers, which is prime food for Underworld Goddess. And then you have decks like Super Heavy, which admittedly aren't really the best to use this against because you're probably going to have to eat all those disruptions anyway. But if you can somehow get this out, you can still rip a disruption in case they're holding onto something. Not gonna lie, I want to put this in Blowout. I think it's mainly really good against Purely and against a Rise Heart Pass for Kshatri-La, But other than that, it's not like the most amazing card. It's definitely better than it going in broke or at the bottom of minimal like it has been lately, so at least there's that. Next up we have Zeus, and Zeus, my son. A lot of decks that can make Zeus can easily bypass things like the Super Heavy Samurai negates and etc, or anything that might otherwise be a problem. Not to mention if Castro doesn't rip this out of your extra deck, it's going to be a huge problem for them as well. I think if your deck can play Zeus, you should absolutely be playing Zeus right now. It's just a free board wipe. Next we have Eclipse and Lunar Eclipse, and these cards had been in Busted and Blowout previously, but honestly I kind of want to put them, I mean, if they do resolve, like if you see this in combination with like a Dark Ruler or something, they're not bad. Like, they're not horrible. So, I mean, you can still do something with them, and Lunar Eclipse, or actually both of them technically, are still disruptions. So, I mean, they're not the worst thing you could play. However, this isn't Castro format anymore. I mean, it's still the best deck, of course, but it's not just Castro you have to worry about. And so you'd rather just play a different, more potent board breaker that doesn't activate or can't be hit by something like Spell Canceller or an Omni Negate. And so they're going to be going in the end of Blowout and the top of Minimal, respectively. And finally, on our list, we have Enemy Controller, and I mean, Enemy Controller, I don't know. I don't think this is that great of a card. So I know I said that stealing is really, really good, but it's mostly good if it's not going to just get straight up negated, or if that's the only valuable thing out of it. Like, changing something, what is it? Is it just defense, or is it face down? Yeah, no, it just changes battle position, period. Like, changing something's battle position doesn't matter, so you have to have that monster in order to tribute to actually get value out of this card. And so, like, say you normal summon something, activate effect, it gets negated, you chain Enemy Controller and tribute it so that it doesn't get destroyed or anything like that, and you get a free value out of this, similar to Droplet. And then the Enemy Controller just gets negated too. I mean, like, what are you gonna really do? It's pretty good against a Rise Hard Pass, not gonna lie, but like, there's probably gonna chain the effect in order to banish itself so that you don't get access to it. And so, I'm not too sure. Personally, I'd play something else. But with all that out of the way, that's going to do it for this month's tier list. So, definitely very eccentric compared to usual. Like, it's so weird seeing a format where Kaijus are like at the top of the top. And then you have Evenly, that was like the most powerful board breaker in the game for like the longest time, going down to the Blowout category compared to Busted because there's so many ways to prepare for it. Really, really weird to see, but I don't know. I think overall this is pretty accurate, at least until the ban list comes around and a deck like Castro ends up getting hit a little bit, at least hopefully. But I don't know, that's just my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comments below, because that's going to do it for the video. If you liked it, please sure to leave a like, as I'll split this video and the channel into recommended. And if you like this content and you see more like it, like the rest of my tier list, then perhaps consider subscribing, because I want to 5,000 subscribers by the end of 2023, not to mention it supports the channel more than anything else, and it's absolutely free. But if you want to support me directly and get some awesome TCG merchandise in return, check out the link in the description to tapiocards.com, purchase anything and use code Aurora5 for 5% off, and of course support me financially. Once again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. This is Aurora, signing off.